All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are in the House of Kayfabe. We're going to do a quick reaction video to one of the coolest pieces in my collection, personally. Shake, Wrestle, and Roll, the album that was released by Adrian Street, who we just lost. Rest in peace. A true pioneer. Draws the line between Gorgeous George all the way to Gold Dust. One of the first characters to really be outlandish. And Steve Barker, you're a musician. You understand what's going on here. This guy basically took glam rock and made it wrestling. He put some wrestling in the glam rock.
Well, man, if me and you have never been more qualified to do a video that combines wrestling and music. Adrian's
hyper obscure in both.
Yes, for sure. I don't know that much about Adrian Street. I don't think I'm that old enough to have caught him. I think if Steve New was around, I think he would have some memories of him. But when I did find out about him later on, as I try to be a historian of this game, I realized that what he was doing in a very real way was he repackaged one of my favorite eras of music, which was late 70s glam rock. You can think David Bowie, you think T-Rex, you can think Mark Bolan. If you've heard Come On Feel the Noise, that's not a Quiet Riot song. That was a glam song first. And he packaged that as something that he knew that would get heat in America, which is androgyny and, just a tinge of degeneracy, I guess, if you'd want to say how Americans would have seen it. Of course, now we know that it's not. And he was a genius. I mean, like a man that, and you know what? We always hear from the God Emperor that Adrian Street was a legitimate badass.
Totally.
Like he was this way, he wore makeup and he wore all these outrageous outfits, but he could also take care of you if needed be.
I think one of the things I relate to, and Barker, you'll appreciate this coming from coal country here in West Virginia, but this guy's dad was literally a coal miner. And there's a photo of him in full garb, again, with his father, who's in full coal mining outfit, helmet, covered in dust.
Straight Zoolander.
Yeah, but there's a British photographer or a British historian who refers to that as capturing the essence of the transformation of Europe from the industrial era to the entertainment era. And when you look at it that way, and we here in Appalachia identify, man, with the coal miners, leaving, they didn't think he was going to make it. His dad is alleged to have said as soon as he misses his mama's cooking, he's going to come back home. And that gave Adrian Street the motivation to become the star that he became in professional wrestling. And I'm excited for you to hear some of this because I just found, before we get to the music, I just found, literally right before we were recording this, a blog from Don Woods, who I mentioned. This is it's credited to Don Woods and Adrian Street with the Pile Driver Band. And I found a blog that Don Woods, who was the producer on this, put up, and he said, Adrian was a professional wrestler who I met in a recording studio in Chester in 1980.
Wow.
He fancied making a recording and was looking for a song. His gimmick was to camp it up with his long blonde locks and face makeup, so I came up with an A and a B side. A Mighty Big Girl and I'm in Love with Me. He recorded the songs, which was, to my surprise, very solid, considering he couldn't sing. They were purchased mainly to throw at him in the wrestling ring, but we had their money. So he might have sold records, to the fans who then threw it into the ring. He went on to write and produce 2 albums for Adrian, which included titles like I'm Only Happy Breaking Bones, Imagine What I Could Do to You, Merchant of Menace, and many more. I went over to the States to put the finishing touches on one of the albums, and he insisted I had to be his barrister from London, Sir Cedric Everhand Hathaway. And I reluctantly went on the circuit with him around the southern states in pink tights and glittering gold waistcoat. His idea, not mine. Having to make legal and totally biased decisions on certain aspects of a wrestling match was a very frightening experience. We promoted the songs on TV and radio and got airplay on MTV, no less. And 4 of the songs were featured in a Hollywood movie called Grunt, the wrestling movie, which I think I have back here somewhere on DVD, or in VHS rather. This all proves you don't have to be able to sing to sell music, Steve Barker.
Oh, man, I've known that for years. Man,
the wrestlers over there were terrific blokes, and it was a great experience to look back on, and I'm still in touch with him. And in August of 2016, and this is cool, the original album, Shake, Wrestle, and Roll, was re-released in the States by a company called Burger Records. It's in its regional state, except it's on clear vinyl with blood splatterings and on CD and cassette, which is really cool. If anybody out there are able to find that, that's cool. Mine is original black vinyl, so I'm guessing it has to be from somewhere in 1980 or whenever this was released.
Ever the Carney. And this is, we always talk about like rock and wrestling. Rock and roll music and wrestling has lived hand in hand for years. We, of course, were on site
for Cyndi Lauper.
Well, we were on site when Ricky Morton told us that he sold 1 million copies of whatever the song is that the Rock and Roll Express recorded, probably 5 years after this one was recorded. We know Jerry Lawler has recorded records. We know Hulk Hogan has recorded records. Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, of course, recorded records. The Honky Tonk Man, Jimmy Hart, of course, wrote many wrestling songs. This is going to be a fun, cool artifact, and I think I have an idea of the style that we are going to listen to. So we're YouTubing it up. We're doing a react video here at the House of Kayfabe. I do too. Adam, let's go and watch Adrian, Exotic Adrian Street and the Pile Driver Band play the thing. Imagine, what is it called? Say it again. Imagine the things.
Imagine what I could do to you. Oh my. Look at the makeup.
So, right off the bat, Adam Harris, this is all heat. This is 1980. This is not the America that we know today, where we're a little more open-minded about alternative lifestyles.
We literally glorify this stuff today, but this is not what happens back in 1980.
This guy is not wrestling in the WWF. I mean, if you want to think the metropolitan area would be a little more forward thinking, this motherfucker's in the South looking like this, all heat. Could you imagine the heat of this guy like wrestling in Mississippi?
Yeah. And that must be Miss Linda next to him.
Oh yeah, I do recognize Miss Linda.
So imagine what I could do to you.
So,
get to the hook, right?
We're getting to the hook. So
38 seconds in.
As a musician, I can tell you this is heavily influenced by that late 70s, and you could even say the New York Dolls as well, that glam scene where they were bringing gender bending and androgyny into rock and roll, being very irreverent. And of course, people couldn't get enough of it, and there were people in England walking around looking like this guy.
The same stuff people can't get enough of in music, we can't get enough of in wrestling.
It's true. The two great entertainments that America has come up with, Western music and pro wrestling. This is even not to get too technical like I do on my channel, Junk Drummer TV. The audio, he's double tracked that, and it gives you that like slight echo. And if you've listened to Ozzy Osbourne, if you've listened to David Bowie, you've heard that trick. This is a great track musically.
Look at this. The ref's checking his feet.
So imagine what I could do to you.
He picks his teeth with a billiard cube. You know some people like that in Huntington, West Virginia.
Yes, I do. Man, this is all heat. Just like seeing this. God, man, not to stereotype the areas that he was wrestling in, but to stereotype the areas that he was wrestling in. Oh, man, this was so much heat, Adam. This would be like scary heat, right?
Well, and again, it dates back to the earliest days of wrestling and the beginnings of television. Gorgeous George got heat for folding his robe before he even got into contact, right, with the opponent. He would fold the robe and then fold it again and fold it again. And that's the same with the referee checking Adrian Street and him figuring out the coolest pose, the most interesting pose, most outlandish pose to do in the corner, man. Tremendous. Tremendous.
See my many attributes won't need a second glance. You know if you resist it, you just wouldn't stand a chance.
Oh, my.
Oh my, that right there is a way to
my.
start a riot. Like, he's putting makeup on this man who I'm sure is a big, tough, strong man who does not want makeup on. Man, this is a different time and era that we're looking at, Adam.
Dude, when we were growing up, $1 Million Man would stuff a $100 bill in the guy's mouth. And Jake the Snake Roberts would put the snake on the guy's body. And the Undertaker would put a man in a body bag. This is way before that. 20 years, 10 years at least before that, man. Is here this guy putting makeup on a guy and giving him a little touch on the cheek there.
Oh, man. Oh, and just a little
And then the
kiss
smack.
and a boot.
A hole right through a solid concrete wall. I can pull a tree out by its roots and that's not all. Now you know about me, you don't need a crystal ball to tell you just what I could do to you.
Great lyrics, great imagery, man. Pulling a tree from the ground. True tough guy, working out.
Well, that's another thing that was, I think we talked about earlier, is he was a legitimate tough guy that would probably hand you your lunch, but he's prancing around.
Son of a coal miner.
Son of a coal miner, right?
I thought
And you know what's extra heat is a guy that looks like this has a hot girl
woman.
with him. Man, he was a wrestling genius.
Yeah,
This is
for
all
sure.
genius. And not to put too fine a point on it, very forward thinking. This is
Definitely.
1980, and we're
Definitely.
playing around in this androgynous sort of homosexual sexuality that was not the mainstream. Like, put it in perspective, Adam. How many years after this, when Ellen DeGeneres kissed a girl on television
On
for the
TV,
first
right.
time, and it was a world-changing event? It's probably 15. I tell you what, it's over 10 years after this era, because I was in high school when that happened, and that was like on the cover of TV Guide for you kids out there.
Yeah.
Look it up.
And Gold Dust was so controversial that people literally wrote to the newspapers about it.
Really?
Still. And here we are. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. WWF got so many complaints about Gold Dust. And I'm sure we like to give Vince McMahon credit for coming up with that, but this proves that there's nothing new in wrestling, and this is one of the it's pioneering, and it's hard, that word gets thrown around a lot, but this guy was way ahead of the curve.
Big time.
something already.
And for being someone who has heard a lot of wrestling music, I'm not mad at this track.
This is not the worst.
This is by far not the worst. Not even close.
To see my many attributes won't need a second glance. And you know if you resist it, you just wouldn't stand a chance.
Attributes. What a great British word to say.
I can crush a house brick with one movement of my hand, and laugh while I reduce it to a dusty heap of sand. I got a splendid figure when I make my chest expand. So imagine what I could do to you. Nice.
What a legend. Holy
Shake,
shit.
Wrestle, and Roll, man, right there by Exotic Adrian Street. I have to believe he wrote those lyrics. I mean, I know they're not complex or anything, but there's some good stuff in there, and it really speaks to his blue-collar mentality.
Yeah, and they were
Pulling trees from the ground.
and they were tough guy lyrics too.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Like, of course, he incorporated the androgyny in there, I guess. But this man was he was still getting himself over as someone who legitimately can beat you up, even though he was, trying to play on the negative stereotypes of the area that he was wrestling in. Even back then, you still got to come off like you could beat somebody up.
Definitely. Yeah, and you got to be able to hold your own. And the only I haven't admittedly not watched a ton of Adrian Street matches, but what I have seen, like the commentator is making a big deal about how much he likes to prance around the ring, and he'll do these exercises around his opponent and be hard to get and play hard to get, but yet at the same time he's still hitting arm drags and still nailing moves and impressive evasions and stuff like this, that where it's like, oh, he's prancing around, but he can also go. This guy could indeed. Who knows what he could do to you?
Well, I mean, as again, we brought him up again, as Ricky Morton said, hell, the job guys could even work. Like back then, you couldn't be, I don't want to say this disparagingly. I don't want to say this disparagingly, but like someone as like you would think of as like a first match indie guy. Those guys couldn't exist in that ecosystem. You had to be able to work or you didn't get called back. Dude, I would be a huge Adrian Street fan if he. And you know what? You know what, Adam? This would work. If he was that now, dude, he would be fucking huge.
Let me tell you something, brother, and this might be a good way to wrap it up. I've talked a little bit about Gorgeous George here. I just picked up this DVD here. It's got as many matches by Gorgeous George, who was a star of early television. He said famously, "I'm not sure if I was made for television or if television was made for me." Gorgeous George. And he draws a line right to this DVD that I picked up for you, my friend Steve Barker.
Ooh.
And it would work today, and it has worked today because of examples like this.
Oh, I love you.
Look at this. This is the best of Dalton Castle, Volume 2.
Oh, you're the man. I love Dalton Castle.
I'm going to put this into the U.S. Postal Service to deliver to your place there.
Actually, that's right.
The river here.
But dude,
but you can draw the lines right from Adrian Street all the way to Dalton Castle.
And what's great about that, and I know that Dalton Castle's not a big deal in AEW, but if you're a Ring of Honor mark, he's a very big deal for you. And on the very first wrestling podcast I did was one many years ago, actually. At this point, I know that whatever year it was when Fandango wrestled Chris Jericho for WrestleMania. It's how long ago that was. And I was talking about Dalton Castle at the time, and I said specifically that Dalton Castle 15 to 20 years ago would have been an Adrian Street Gorgeous George heel playing on the prejudices of his crowds. And at that time, he was in a
beloved.
Well, even more than that, he was in a feud with a man's man, Silas
Young?
Silas Young.
The last real man.
The last real man. And he was the heel. And in 1980, that wouldn't have happened. Wrestling is the fucking best. Dalton Castle is coming out with boys, and it's getting over
culture in such amazing ways. Wrestling is fantastic.
I love it. Adam, what a great idea for a video.
Yeah, this has been fun and gave me an excuse to show off one of my favorite pieces in my collection, man. It's I just love, and Matt Mullins, he loves music and wrestling, and this is one of the reasons I had to own this. Is like, this is such a cool piece of wrestling history right here. Shake, wrestle, and roll. Long before the rock and wrestling era. 5 years before Cyndi Lauper.
Wrap us up, Adam Harris.
Thanks for joining us here on the House of Kayfabe. I think this would be great crossover content for our friend over at Junk Drummer TV. Be sure to check him out, and thanks for joining us here on the House of Kayfabe on YouTube. See you next time.